The bass was a physical thing inside the Elysian. It wasn't just sound, it was a second heartbeat, a frantic, synthetic pulse that hammered against Riley Monroe's ribs and vibrated up through the soles of her boots. It was a language she understood better than words, a tide of energy she commanded from her throne of illuminated glass and steel. From the DJ booth, raised above the sea of bodies, Las Vegas was a kaleidoscope of fractured light and raw desire. Strobes of electric blue and violent magenta sliced through the manufactured smoke, catching the sheen of sweat on skin, the glint of a watch, the predatory sparkle in 1,000 pairs of eyes. This was her world, a carefully curated chaos of sound and light where she was the conductor. Riley adjusted the gain, her fingers gliding over the mixer with an intimacy born of 1,000 nights like this one. She watched the crowd, a single heaving organism, and felt the familiar surge of power. She could make them jump, make them sway, make them forget the desert sun waiting outside to scorch their sins away. Tonight the energy was electric, a current running from her fingertips straight into the soul of the club. He'd approached her an hour ago, during a rare lull as she transitioned tracks. He wasn't the usual type, not a slick tourist with too much money and not enough shame, nor a local trying to impress a date. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with a quiet intensity that felt out of place amidst the noise. He'd simply called her set brilliant and offered to have a drink sent up, a custom mix he claimed was the club's best-kept secret. A tribute to the artist, he'd said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Flattered and caught off guard, she'd accepted. It arrived moments later, a vibrant green concoction in a chilled glass, delivered by a waitress who vanished back into the chaos. Now, as the clock pushed past 2 a.m., the edges of her world were starting to fray. The beat, once a perfect extension of her own rhythm, now felt disjointed, the kick drum landing a millisecond behind her thoughts. The lights, once a symphony she controlled, were bleeding together into a blinding, painful smear. A wave of dizziness washed over her, sudden and disorienting. Her hands, usually so steady, felt clumsy on the controls. She gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. The drink, the vibrant green drink. Her blood ran cold. She fumbled, missing her cue for the drop. The crowd's energy faltered, a collective murmur of confusion rippling through the floor. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog in her mind. She needed to get out. Now. She slammed a pre-recorded transition track into the mix, a sloppy amateur move she hadn't made in years, and pushed herself away from the console. Her legs felt like lead, disconnected from her brain's frantic commands. Each step down the private staircase from the booth was a battle against gravity. The noise of the club crashed over her, no longer a symphony, but a cacophony of muffled voices in distorted bass too. When she reached the bottom, he was there, waiting. The man with the quiet intensity and the deceptive smile. "Feeling all right, Riley?" he asked, his voice a calm island in the storm of sound. He reached out, his hand steadying her elbow. His touch felt wrong, proprietary. "You look a little unsteady. Maybe you need some fresh air." "I'm fine," she slurred, the words thick and clumsy on her tongue. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, a subtle assertion of control. "I don't think you are. My car is just outside. Let me get you home safely." Home. The word sounded alien. Her mind screamed danger, but her body was a traitor, refusing to obey. The world was tilting on its axis, the shadows in the corners of the club stretching and twisting like living things. He started to steer her toward a side exit, away from the main throng, toward the deeper darkness of a service corridor. This was it, a story she'd heard 100 times, the cautionary tale whispered between female performers in this city. It wasn't supposed to happen here. Not at the Elysian, not in Marco Vitali's club. The name was a prayer and a curse in Las Vegas. Marco Vitali, a man who moved through the city like a ghost, his presence felt in every casino, every backroom deal, every shifting line of power. He was the owner of this glittering palace, a king in a kingdom built of glass, steel, and secrets. They said nothing happened within his walls without his knowledge, without his explicit permission. They said his control was absolute, and as Riley's knees buckled, she knew they were wrong. From the second-floor mezzanine, hidden behind one-way glass in a suite that smelled of sandalwood and amber, Marco Vitali watched the scene unfold. He didn't need to hear their words to understand the narrative. He'd seen this play before, in other cities, in other lives. The predator, disguised as a savior. The victim, her will dissolving into a chemical haze. But this was his stage, and unauthorized performances were not tolerated. His eyes, the color of old whiskey and cold calculation, narrowed. He saw the girl, his new DJ Riley, the one who played with a fire he hadn't seen in years, stumble. He saw the man, a mid-level accountant for a rival syndicate named Alec, guide her with a grip that was too firm, too possessive. Marco's business was built on a simple, brutal principle: order. Every card dealt, every drink poured, every bet placed in his empire was a cog in a perfectly calibrated machine. Alec's actions were a wrench in the gears, a violation. Marco pressed a small, discreet button on the underside of the polished mahogany table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He simply watched, his expression unreadable, as two figures detached themselves from the shadows near the service corridor below. They moved with an unnatural economy of motion, specters in tailored suits. Down on the floor, Alec was becoming impatient. Riley's resistance, weak as it was an annoyance. "Don't make this difficult," he hissed, his voice losing its charming veneer. He pulled her harder, and a small choked sob escaped her lips. That was the sound that broke Marco's stillness. Before his men could intercept, Marco was already moving. He descended a private staircase, emerging from a door that seemed to materialize from a paneled wall. He didn't run. He flowed through the crowd, a shark parting a school of fish. People moved out of his way instinctively, responding to an aura of absolute authority that needed no introduction. He reached the corridor just as Alec was fumbling with the handle of the exit door. Marco's hand landed on Alec's shoulder. It wasn't a violent gesture, but it made the bigger man freeze as if he'd been electrocuted. Alec turned, his face a mask of confusion that quickly melted into sheer terror as he recognized who was standing before him. "Mr. Vitali, I was just helping the young lady. She's not well." Marco's gaze was flat, devoid of emotion. It drifted from Alec's terrified face to Riley, who was leaning against the wall, her eyes unfocused, a single tear tracing a path through her makeup. He noted the slight tremble in her hands. 5, the shallowness of her breath. He looked back at Alec. "You have 5 seconds to remove your hand from her." Marco's voice was barely a whisper, yet it cut through the distant thrum of the music like a razor. "Then you are going to walk with my associates. They have some questions for you regarding the unauthorized pharmaceuticals you just administered to my employee." Alec's hand dropped from Riley as if her skin had turned to acid. "Mr. Vitali, I swear, it's a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," Marco said, his tone final. His 2 men materialized on either side of Alec, their presence overwhelming. "Everything has a cost 7. You're about to learn the price of disrupting my business." Alec was escorted away, swallowed by the shadows he had sought to use. He didn't struggle. In Marco Vitali's world, no one did. Marco turned his full attention to Riley. The intensity of his gaze made her feel pinned to the wall, even in her drug state 8. He was handsome in a severe, dangerous way. Sharp jaw, dark hair impeccably styled, a suit that probably cost more than her car. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They saw everything. "You're safe now," he stated, a simple declaration of fact. He reached out not to grab her, but to gently tuck a stray strand of fiery red hair behind her ear. His touch was unexpectedly warm, a stark contrast to the coldness of his voice. "But you are a complication." He scooped her into his arms before she could protest, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Her head fell against his shoulder, the scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely masculine filling her senses. The world dissolved into a blur of motion and the steady, solid beat of his heart under her ear. She was losing consciousness, the last vestiges of her strength giving way to the drug. The last thing she heard was his voice, a low murmur close to her ear, a voice accustomed to giving commands that were never disobeyed. "From this moment on, you will do exactly as I say." 10. When Riley awoke, the first thing she registered was silence. A profound, absolute silence that was more alien than the loudest nightclub. The second was the fabric against her skin, sheets so fine and soft they felt like cool water. She was in a bed, a massive one, in a room bathed in the soft gray light of pre-dawn. Panic flared, and she sat bolt upright, her head pounding in protest. The room was a study in minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking panorama of the Las Vegas Strip, a river of silent, sleeping neon. The furniture was sleek, dark, and ruthlessly modern. There was no clutter, no personal touch, save for a single perfect white orchid on a bedside table. Her clothes from the night before were gone. In their place, draped over a severe-looking armchair, was a simple black silk robe. She clutched the sheets to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. 11. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage. I had my housekeeper attend to you. Your clothes were compromised. The voice came from the doorway. Marco Vitali stood there, leaning against the frame, as immaculate in a simple black t-shirt and gray trousers as he had been in a suit. He held two mugs in his hands. Drink this, he said, walking into the room and placing one of the mugs on the nightstand. It was far enough away that she would have to move to get it, a calculated distance. It's water with electrolytes. It will help with the after effects of the rohypnol. Rohypnol. He said the word so casually as if discussing the weather. Riley's stomach twisted. Where am I? She asked, her voice a raw whisper. My private residence, the penthouse above the Elysian. He took a sip from his own mug, which she presumed was coffee. His dark eyes never left her face. 12. You will remain here until I have sanitized the situation? Sanitized. The word was clinical, chilling. You mean Alec? What did you do to him? A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a fleeting, dangerous expression. I asked him questions. He was forthcoming. It seems your friend Alec was a very junior player in a much larger, more ambitious organization. An organization that was using my club as a transit hub for their human trafficking operations. He was your handler. Your destination was a private airstrip outside of Henderson. Riley felt the blood drain from her face. She could feel the ghost of Alec's hand on her arm, the cloying sweetness of the green drink. She had been a transaction, a piece of cargo. Why are you telling me this? She choked out. Because you are now the only living witness who can identify the face of their local operation, Marco stated, his voice devoid of sympathy. It was a statement of fact, which makes you a liability, to them and to me. He set his mug down and walked toward the vast window, his back to her. He looked out over the city that was his domain, his kingdom. This betrayal runs deeper than one foolish accountant, he said, his voice a low thrum of controlled fury. It required access, security overrides, and willful blindness from someone within my inner circle. Someone I trust. Someone who will pay dearly for their mistake. He turned to face her, his eyes burning with a cold fire. Alec was a symptom. I am hunting for the disease, and until I find it and cut it out, you are the one loose end in my city. He looked at her then, not as a woman, not as a victim, but as a problem, a chess piece on a board she didn't understand. So you see, Riley, he said, his voice dropping to that same quiet, lethal tone he'd used in the corridor. You think I saved you last night. That is a romantic notion. The truth is, I merely acquired you. You are a secret, my secret. And here, in my home, is the only place in this city I can guarantee a secret is kept. The silence was a weapon. In the hours that followed Marco's chilling declaration, Riley learned that silence in his world was not an absence of sound, but a presence. It was the sound of surveillance cameras panning silently in their mounts, the whisper of a state-of-the-art ventilation system, the noiseless tread of unseen guards patrolling the corridors of his sky-high fortress. It was a silence that listened. She spent the first day in a state of suspended terror, wrapped in the black silk robe that felt more like a uniform than a comfort. She explored her cage. It was the guest suite, she realized, though it was larger and more opulent than any apartment she had ever been able to afford. The bathroom was a cavern of Italian marble and chrome, the walk-in closet stocked with an unnervingly accurate selection of new clothes in her size, simple, elegant pieces in muted colors. Jeans, cashmere sweaters, soft cotton t-shirts. Nothing ostentatious, nothing provocative. It was a wardrobe for someone meant to be comfortable, but also invisible. Someone being hidden. He had left her alone, but his presence was everywhere. In the scent of sandalwood that lingered in the air, in the perfect, sterile order of the room, in the knowledge that he was somewhere beyond her door, orchestrating a hunt for which she was the unwilling catalyst. She tried the door. It wasn't locked. The discovery sent a jolt of something, not quite hope, but confusion, through her. She could walk out of the room. But to where? Into the rest of the penthouse? Into the path of the man who now considered her his property? She stayed put. The unlocked door a more profound symbol of her imprisonment than any bolt or chain. It was a statement of confidence. He didn't need to lock her in. He knew she had nowhere to go. That evening he came to her. He didn't knock. The door simply opened, and he was there, holding a tray. On it was a simple meal: grilled chicken, steamed asparagus, and a small portion of quinoa. A bottle of water. No wine. It was fuel, not a feast. "You need to eat," he said, his voice the same flat, unemotional baritone. He set the tray on a small table near the window. Riley stayed on the bed, clutching the silk robe around her. "I'm not hungry." That wasn't a request. He didn't look at her, instead gazing out at the city lights, a tapestry of captured stars spread beneath them. "My questions for Alec were thorough. The drug he used was designed for a quick takedown and rapid metabolization to avoid detection, but it leaches nutrients. If you don't eat, you will become weak. You will not be useful to me if you are weak." Useful, the word stung more than any threat. Useful for what? "I told you, I don't remember anything else." "Memory is a fickle thing," Marco replied, finally turning his gaze on her. It felt like a physical weight. "Sometimes it needs a key, a sound, a smell, a face." Alec was uncooperative at first, but he grew more talkative. He mentioned a business card he was given by his contact, a point of entry into this network. He said he showed it to you to prove he was legitimate, a small boast to impress the pretty DJ before he sold her. Riley's mind reeled back, sifting through the syrupy fog of that night. The man Alec, his quiet intensity, the way he'd leaned in close at the booth, a flash of memory, sharp and vivid, cut through the haze. A black business card. Embossed, not printed, a symbol on it. "There was a card," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It was thick, expensive, black. There was a symbol on it, a bird of some kind. Gold." Marco's stillness became absolute. "Describe the bird." "It was rising, wings spread, like a phoenix," she said, the image solidifying in her mind. "He said it was the mark of a very exclusive club, the Phoenix conglomerate. He said they were investors." Marco stared at her, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something other than cold control in his eyes. It was the look of a predator catching a scent. "You've just become the most valuable asset in my investigation," he said, his voice a low growl. "And the most significant liability." He turned and walked to the door. "Eat, all of it. We have work to do in the morning." He left, the door closing with a soft, definitive click behind him. The next morning, the routine changed. He brought her not to the guest suite's table, but to his office. It was a room that felt like the command center of a modern-day empire. One wall was a bank of monitors displaying security feeds from every corner of the Elysian. Another was a single immense pane of glass overlooking the desert. The desk was a slab of obsidian, clean save for a laptop and a single, encrypted satellite phone. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to a leather chair opposite his own. He was already working, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He pushed a tablet across the desk towards her. On it were dozens of images, logos, corporate symbols, family crests. "Find the Phoenix." For hours they worked in a tense, shared silence. Riley scanned image after image, her designer's eye catching subtle variations in line weight and form. He worked on his laptop, occasionally speaking in low, rapid-fire Italian into the satellite phone. The air crackled with a strange, focused energy. She was a captive, yes, but for the first time, she felt like a participant rather than a pawn. She was the only one with the key, and it gave her a sliver of power that she clung to desperately. Here, she said suddenly, her finger tapping on the screen. That's it. The wings are slightly different from the others, more angular. The head is tilted to the left. Marco leaned over, his arm brushing hers. A jolt of electricity shot through her at the contact. She could smell the clean, sharp scent of his soap, the faint hint of coffee on his breath. He was too close, his presence overwhelming the space. He studied the image, then looked at her, his eyes unreadable. Are you certain? I design logos for a living, or I used to. She corrected herself, a bitter taste in her mouth. I notice details. That's the one. He nodded, a sharp, decisive movement, and returned to his laptop. He typed for a few moments, his jaw tight. Phoenix International Holdings, he said, more to himself than to her. A shell corporation based out of Macau. They've been buying up distressed properties on the north end of the strip for the last 6 months. Quietly, too quietly, he stood up and began to pace, a caged tiger in his own penthouse. They thought they could operate in my city, under my roof, using my resources to build their own filthy empire. An insult. He stopped and looked at her, and the full force of his focus was unnerving. This changes things. This is not some small-time trafficking ring. This is an invasion, and you are standing right at the epicenter. He walked back to her, crouching down so his eyes were level with hers. The proximity was dizzying. They will have realized Alec is missing by now, he said, his voice low and intense. They will be hunting for the reason why. They will be hunting for you. You are no longer just a liability. You are a threat to them, and there is only one way they will deal with a threat like you. Riley's heart hammered against her ribs. So what happens now? Now, Marco said, his hand coming up to gently cup her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheek. A gesture so at odds with his menacing words that her mind short-circuited. Now, you do not leave my side, not for a moment. You will eat with me, work with me, and when I am not in this apartment, you will be in your room, with the door locked, and 2 of my most trusted men outside. There are no more unlocked doors, Riley. No more illusions of choice. He was so close she could see the flecks of gold in his whiskey-colored eyes. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her skin. She was terrified, but beneath the terror, something else was stirring. A strange, unwilling flicker of excitement, a dangerous attraction to the certainty in his voice, to the absolute, suffocating protection he was offering. You understand? He pressed, his grip on her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. Good, he whispered, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before meeting her eyes again. Because the game has changed. They have declared war, and they have made the fatal mistake of leaving their most valuable weapon in my hands. He released her and stood up, the moment of intimacy shattered, replaced once more by the cold, calculating mind of the strategist. Let's get back to work. Tell me everything you remember about the men Alex spoke to that night. Every word, every gesture. We're going to burn their world to the ground. The penthouse, once a gilded cage, became a strategic bunker. The days bled into one another, marked not by the sun rising and setting over the desert, but by the relentless rhythm of Marco's investigation. Riley's life contracted to the space of his apartment and the confines of his presence. She lived in a state of hyper-awareness, every nerve ending thrumming with a mixture of fear and a strange, burgeoning dependency. He was her captor, her protector, the sole arbiter of her existence. Their work sessions in his office became the new routine. She was his memory, a living archive of the night that had shattered her life. He would push stacks of surveillance photos in front of her, faces from the club's security feeds. Him! Did you see Alex speak to him? He would demand, his voice sharp, impatient. Riley would scan the faces, the ghosts of that night, searching for a flicker of recognition. Most were blurs, but occasionally a detail would snag in her memory. A distinctive ring, a tattoo on a wrist, the way a man held his cigarette. Each small piece of information was a victory, a breadcrumb on the trail. Marco, in turn, was a revelation of controlled lethality. He moved with a purpose that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. He was a master of information, his network of spies and enforcers feeding him a constant stream of data. He cross-referenced names, financial records, and shipping manifests with a speed and clarity that left her breathless. He was building a web, and she was sitting at its very center. One evening, after a grueling day of staring at screens, he found her in the main living area, standing before the vast window, watching the city below ignite with evening neon. "You're pale," he stated, coming to stand beside her. She didn't jump. She had become attuned to his silent movements. "I haven't been outside in a week," she said, her voice flat. "I haven't felt the sun on my skin." He was silent for a long moment, studying her profile against the glass. "The risks are still too high. They are looking for you. My sources confirm it. They are professionals. They will not stop. So I'm to live in this glass tower forever?" The question held a bitter edge. "You will live here until you are safe," he countered, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. He reached out, his fingers gently touching the side of her neck, tracing the faint purple-green shadow of a bruise left from Alex's grip. She flinched, not from pain, but from the memory. His hand stopped instantly. "Did he hurt you anywhere else?" The question was clinical, yet beneath it lay a current of something darker, more personal. "No," she whispered. He stepped closer, his body heat a tangible presence behind her. "Let me see." It was not a request. He gently turned her to face him, his eyes scanning her with an unnerving intensity. He tilted her chin up with one finger, examining her neck under the soft light of the room. His touch was feather-light, a stark contrast to the power she knew he possessed. "This," he murmured, his thumb brushing over the bruise, "this is an insult, an imperfection on my property that I allowed to happen." His property. The word should have sent a chill of fear down her spine. Instead, it sent a wave of heat through her veins. The raw, unapologetic possessiveness in his voice was a drug more potent than the one Alec had used. It was terrifying and, in a way she couldn't explain, profoundly reassuring. In a world where she had become a disposable commodity, this dangerous man had declared her his. "I am not your property, Marco," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. His eyes locked with hers, a flicker of dark amusement in their depths. "Aren't you? Who feeds you? Who clothes you? Who stands between you and the men who want to put you in a shipping container bound for Dubai? You live in my home, under my protection, by my rules. In my world, Riley, that is the very definition of ownership." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were chains, invisible but unbreakable. And the most terrifying part was that a part of her didn't want to break them. The part that had been so tired of fighting, so tired of being alone in a city that devoured the weak. "We have a lead," he said, abruptly changing the subject, the moment of charged intimacy dissolving back into strategy. He released her and stepped back. "The Phoenix conglomerate is hosting a private auction tonight at the Serafina Gallery downtown. It's a front, a way for the city's elite to launder money and trade in more than just art. My source says their leadership will be present, the people who give the orders. And you're going?" "We are going," he corrected her. Riley stared at him, bewildered. "You just said I couldn't leave the penthouse, that it's too dangerous." "It is more dangerous to leave you here. The betrayal came from within my own organization. I cannot be certain this apartment is secure while I am gone. The only place I can guarantee your safety is at my side." He paused, his eyes raking over her. "And I need you. They don't know I have you. They will be relaxed, their guard down. You are my element of surprise. I need you to identify the man you saw Alex speaking with, the man who gave him the card." It was a test, a demand for absolute trust. He was asking her to walk willingly into the heart of the danger, with only him as her shield. It was a choice, to remain a passive prisoner in his tower, or to become an active player in his deadly game. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach, but the thought of staying here, helpless and waiting, was worse. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll do it." A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed his features. "Good. There is a gown in your closet, red. My housekeeper will assist you." 2 hours later, Riley looked at her reflection and didn't recognize the woman staring back. The red gown was a masterpiece of silk that clung to her curves, a slash of defiant color against her pale skin. Her fiery hair was swept up in an elegant twist, and subtle makeup, applied by the silent, efficient housekeeper, highlighted her eyes and lips. She looked like she belonged in Marco Vitali's world, a world of luxury, power, and secrets. He was waiting for her in the living room, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. When he saw her, he stopped, his glass of whiskey frozen halfway to his lips. For a long, silent moment, he just looked at her, and the raw, possessive hunger in his eyes made the air thick and hard to breathe. "Red was a good choice," he said, his voice a low, rough murmur. He walked to her, his presence commanding the room. He handed her a delicate diamond-encrusted bracelet. As he clasped it around her wrist, his fingers brushed the pulse point, and her breath hitched. "For tonight, you are not Riley Monroe, the DJ. You are my guest. You will stay close, you will not speak unless spoken to, and you will signal me if you see him. A simple touch to this bracelet. Nothing more. Do you understand?" She nodded, her throat dry. "Let's go," he said, his hand finding the small of her back, a gesture of both guidance and ownership. "It's time to see who dared to bring a war to my city." The Serafina Gallery was a temple of minimalist design and obscene wealth. White walls, polished concrete floors, and millions of dollars of abstract art hung under track lighting. The air was thick with the scent of champagne and expensive perfume. Men in tuxedos and women in jewels moved through the space, their laughter brittle and their smiles sharp. It was a gathering of sharks, and Marco moved among them like the apex predator he was. Riley stayed glued to his side, his hand a constant branding heat on her back. She scanned the crowd, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Every face was a potential threat, every smile a possible mask. This was his world, she realized, not the glitz of the casino floor, but this, the quiet, deadly intersection of money and power, where empires were won and lost in a whispered conversation. Then she saw him. He was standing near a massive, chaotic painting, speaking to a group of men. It was him, the man from the club, the one who had given Alec the card. He was older, with silver hair and a patrician air, but the eyes were the same, cold, empty, devoid of humanity. Her hand instinctively went to the bracelet, her fingers fumbling with the clasp. Marco's hand tightened on her back, a silent acknowledgement. He didn't look at her, didn't break his conversation with a senator he was charming, but she felt his entire body go rigid. He smoothly excused himself, his hand never leaving her. He began to guide her toward a quieter alcove, away from the main room. "Tell me," he commanded, his voice a low hiss in her ear. "The man by the painting, silver hair, blue suit. That's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. Marco glanced over, his expression unreadable. "Dmitry Volkov, my head of security." The words hit Riley like a physical blow. The betrayal. It wasn't just a stranger, it was the man in charge of protecting Marco's entire operation, the man he trusted with his life. Before Marco could react, before he could process the depth of the treachery, a subtle shift occurred in the room. The exits were suddenly blocked by men who were not on the gallery's staff. Dmitry turned, his cold eyes meeting Marco's from across the room. A slow, triumphant smile spread across his face. It was a trap, and they had just walked right into it. Marco's reaction was instantaneous. He didn't hesitate, didn't show a flicker of fear. He moved, a blur of deadly grace, pushing Riley behind him, his body a shield between her and the closing circle of enemies. He reached inside his jacket, and the soft click of a safety being released was the loudest sound in the world. The champagne-fueled chatter of the party died as the first gunshot shattered the illusion of civility. Glass exploded. Women screamed. Marco's body covered hers, pushing her down behind a marble pedestal. His voice was a raw command in her ear, cutting through the chaos. "Stay down!" Chaos erupted. The civilized veneer of the gallery vaporized in an instant, replaced by the primal symphony of violence. The pop of suppressed gunfire was a counter-rhythm to the splintering of marble and the high-pitched shriek of shattering glass. Marco's body was a wall of muscle and resolve, shielding Riley from the unfolding massacre. The scent of cordite and ozone filled the air, acrid and sharp, mingling with the cloying sweetness of spilled champagne. "Leo, status!" Marco's voice was a low growl in her ear, a command that cut through the noise. He had a pistol in his hand, materialized from nowhere, moving with a fluid, practiced deadliness that was terrifying to behold. A voice crackled in a nearly invisible earpiece. 4 hostiles east wing, 2 more blocking the main exit. Volkov is moving towards the loading bay. Sir, they've cut the power to the main elevators. The service lift, then. Create a path. We are leaving now. He spared a single, fleeting glance down at Riley. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a terror that was almost hypnotic. Stay behind me. Do not stop moving, no matter what you see. What she saw was a ballet of death. Marco moved not like a man, but like a force of nature. He didn't waste movements, didn't waste bullets. 2 shots, precise and economical, and a man who had been advancing on their position crumpled to the floor, a splash of crimson blooming on his white shirt. He pulled Riley to her feet, his grip on her arm like a steel vise, and they were moving. The world became a blur of fragmented images. The overturned pedestal they had hidden behind. The terrified, screaming faces of the city's elite, now reduced to crawling figures seeking cover. The cold, indifferent eyes of Dimitri's men, professional killers whose only mistake was underestimating the king whose castle they had invaded. Another gunman appeared from behind a large sculpture. Before Riley could even scream, a shot rang out from a different direction. The man fell. A figure emerged from the shadows. Leo, Marco's associate, a pistol in each hand. He nodded once at Marco, a silent communication passing between them, and then he was moving again, a loyal wraith clearing their path. They reached the service corridor, the same kind of anonymous, sterile hallway where Alec had tried to take her. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. Marco kicked open the door to a service elevator, shoving her inside before turning to provide cover fire. Leo joined him, and for a terrifying 10 seconds, the narrow corridor was filled with the deafening roar of gunfire. Then the doors were sliding shut, encasing them in a metal box that smelled of grease and fear. The elevator began its descent, the silence within its walls a stark contrast to the chaos they had just left. Riley was trembling, her body racked with adrenaline-fueled shivers. Marco's hand was still on her arm, his thumb making small, grounding circles against her skin. He wasn't even breathing hard. "It's over," he said, his voice low. It wasn't a comfort, it was a statement of fact. "Dimitri," she began, her voice cracking. "Volkov made a critical error," Marco said, his eyes cold as chips of ice. "He assumed that because I built an empire on order, I had forgotten the beauty of chaos. He will be found, and he will be reminded." The elevator doors opened into a silent, subterranean parking garage. A black, armored sedan was waiting, its engine humming. Leo moved to the driver's seat. Marco guided Riley into the back, sliding in beside her, and the car pulled away, leaving the gallery and its carnage behind. They drove through the glittering, indifferent streets of Las Vegas. No sirens followed. In Marco's world, problems like this were handled internally, swept away like dust in the desert wind. He took her not to the penthouse, but to a different location. A sleek, modernist house built into the side of a mountain, overlooking the city from a remote, unassailable distance. A safe house. Inside, the silence was different. It was the quiet of the desert, vast and empty. A different kind of cage. Marco led her to a bathroom that was all slate and glass. "Clean up," he commanded, his voice softer now but still firm. "There are clothes in the closet." Riley showered in a daze, the hot water doing little to wash away the chill that had settled deep in her bones. She watched the water swirl with the faint grime of the gallery floor and imagined it was blood. When she emerged, wrapped in a thick, white towel, he was there, standing in the bedroom, having already shed his tuxedo jacket and bow tie. His white shirt was pristine, save for a small, dark smudge of what looked like gunpowder near his cuff. He looked at her, and the control in his eyes finally seemed to crack. The strategist was gone, replaced by something more primal, more raw. He crossed the room in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to frame her face, his thumbs gently wiping away tears she hadn't even realized were falling. "You're safe," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "I have you. You're safe." "He was your head of security," she choked out, the reality of the betrayal hitting her with fresh force. "The man you trusted." "Trust is a luxury," he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. "One I can no longer afford with anyone. But you." The statement hung in the air between them, heavy and significant. In the span of a week, she had gone from being his liability to the only person in his world he could trust. The power dynamic had shifted in a way that was both terrifying and intoxicating. "Marco," she breathed, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart. That was all it took. His mouth crashed down on hers, a kiss of savage possession and desperate relief. It wasn't gentle or questioning like their first kiss had been. This was a claiming. It was the raw, unfiltered expression of a man who had just walked through fire to protect what was his. His hands slid from her face, down her back, pulling her flush against him, the towel falling unheeded to the floor. She met his ferocity with her own, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body arching into his. This wasn't about love or romance. It was about survival. It was about finding an anchor in a world that had just tried to tear them apart. It was a visceral, desperate need to affirm that they were both still alive, still breathing, still here. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, their mouths never breaking contact as he carried her to the bed. Later, lying tangled in the sheets, the city a distant, shimmering jewel below them, the silence returned. But it was a shared silence now, intimate and profound. "They'll keep hunting me," she said, her voice a soft murmur against his skin. "Let them try," he replied, his arm tightening around her. "They will find that this city has a new rule, and the rule is your name. Anyone who speaks it, anyone who searches for it, will answer to me." He was quiet for a moment, and she could almost feel the gears turning in his mind, the strategist re-emerging from the ashes of passion. "I can give you a way out," he said, his voice unexpectedly flat. "A new name, a new life, a quiet town in Oregon or a villa in Tuscany. Anywhere. No one would ever find you. I would arrange it." Riley pulled back slightly, looking at him in the dim light. She saw the conflict in his eyes. The king of Las Vegas, the man who controlled everything, was offering to let go of the one asset he couldn't afford to lose. It was the ultimate test. She thought of her old life, the struggle, the anonymity, the constant, grinding loneliness. It was safe, but it wasn't living. Then she thought of the last week, the terror, the danger, but also the intense, vibrant feeling of being at the center of the universe, of being seen, of being protected with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. "And what would you do?" she asked softly. A dark, dangerous smile touched his lips. "I would burn the Phoenix conglomerate to the ground. I would salt the earth where their empire stood. And I would spend the rest of my life knowing you were safe, even if it meant I could never see you again." She traced the sharp line of his jaw with her finger. "What if I don't want a quiet town in Oregon?" His eyes bored into hers, searching, demanding. "Then what do you want, Riley?" "I think," she said, her voice barely a whisper, a thread of steel running through it, "I want to watch the fire." A slow, possessive smile spread across Marco's face. It was the smile of a king who had just been handed the perfect weapon. He pulled her close, his lips brushing against her ear. "Then you'll need a ringside seat," he whispered. He shifted, reaching for the satellite phone on the nightstand, his body still half covering hers. He dialed a number from memory. "Leo, it's time. Liquidate the gallery's assets and scrub the guest list. I want Volkov's family, his friends, his dog walker, everyone he has ever spoken to, brought in. I want to know where he breathes. Find him." He paused, his gaze finding Riley's in the darkness. "And when you do not kill him. Bring him to me. I want him to understand the consequences of touching what is mine." He ended the call and set the phone down, his attention returning fully to her. He pulled the sheet over them, cocooning them together in the darkness. The immediate threat of the ambush was over, but the war had just begun. Her old life was gone, incinerated in the chaos of the gallery. Her new life was this: lying beside a dangerous man in a desert fortress, a man who had just declared war on a global syndicate, all because they had made the mistake of trying to take her from him. He pulled her on top of him, his hands possessively tracing the curve of her spine. "You're mine now, Riley," he stated, the words no longer a threat but a vow. "Not just until this is over. Forever." She looked down at him, at the face of the man who was both her captor and her savior. She saw the ruthless killer, the brilliant strategist, and the possessive lover, all warring for dominance in his dark eyes. She didn't know if this was a love story or a tragedy. She only knew that she had made her choice. She lowered her head and kissed him, sealing her fate as the city of sin glittered silently below them, waiting for the dawn and the bloodshed it would bring.